there was almost at times this emphasis that you don't get married to get married. You get married to have sex. I think that we have to be careful not to allow marriage as a follower of Jesus to become an idol. There's so much value in having an outside voice that you trust. It reveals the things about you that maybe you didn't realize were problems. It was a challenge before marriage, and it's going to be a challenge after marriage. Welcome back to the Bad Pastor Podcast. You have made it to episode 6. Congratulations. Or maybe you're listening for the first time today. I would highly encourage you to go back and check out episodes 1 through 5. Some really interesting conversation. Honestly, episode 5 has created some really great conversation on some of the social media accounts, on especially TikTok and a few on YouTube. So I've really been enjoying. What's been really cool is there's conversation going on before I have a chance to join the conversation. So it's like someone comments and then someone comments back. And to be fair, those are just clips of the episode. It's not the whole episode there, but it's really cool to see. So thank you guys so much for your support. Thank you for listening. There is a Substack set up for the podcast now. Substack, it's kind of like a newsletter, blog type of site. So every Wednesday when an episode goes live, if you're subscribed on Substack, which it's free, by the way, if you're subscribed on Substack, then email goes to your inbox telling you, hey, new episode of the Bad Pastor Podcast is live. You click that link, you can see the show notes. And really the show notes, I probably shouldn't call them show notes. They're more of just like a summary of the episode. Sometimes when I'm working on those after recording, there's some additional thoughts that I'd like to add in, whatever. Definitely, if you're a reader, it's a great resource for you to have. At the bottom of that, there are links to iTunes, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube, where you can go and watch or listen to the podcast. And there's also links. There's actually a whole resource post page I did on Substack that links to podcasts and other things. I'll release a new resource page update periodically, just as I read and consume more content and books and things myself. But that's also, a few people have asked, hey, I want more resources. I want more messages listened to. That's a great way just to continue to help you as you grow on your own journey. Now, for today's episode, I'm very excited for this one. I really wrestled with what to do this episode around. What kind of content do we discuss? What do we dive into? What pot do we stir? What mess do we get into? And I had several ideas, and I got really frustrated. I started to feel anxious because I got to freaking record the podcast. I don't know what I'm gonna talk about. And I was talking to my wife, and she said, well, why don't, it's our anniversary. Why don't you talk about marriage? And so she gave me some great ideas, and I just wrote them out and developed them. So today we're going to talk about the truth about marriage culture. Now, the day that I'm recording this, June 2nd, is my 13th wedding anniversary. So sure, there may be some nostalgic moments through this episode, so bear with me. This episode, though, if you're like, I'm not even getting married, bro, there are some things in here that I think and hope will encourage you if you're single, or you're single forever, or you're married, or you're divorced, or you're engaged. I'm really hoping that this episode would encourage really anybody who's listening, because when you think about marriage culture, let's just dive into the episode. Ready? Buckle up. It's going to be a journey. The truth about marriage culture is a fascinating thing to talk about, because I think of marriage culture in the church, specifically for people who follow Jesus. It's so tricky. And I remember in Bible college at Liberty University, there was such this like everybody was trying to find their mate, their life partner, their wife. And there was the whole ring by spring idea of, like, the joke was that you'd go in and you'd have an engagement ring by spring. There was such this culture of everybody needs to get married. Everybody needs to find a partner. That's what's important right now. And I fell into that trap, dude. My first semester as a freshman at college, I was always shy to talk to girls. When I was trying to, as my 11-year-old would say, riz up my wife, our senior year of high school, I had the hardest time talking. Now, in fairness, she was always around her friends. And as a guy, like, it's intimidating talking to a lady when she's with her friends. But I remember my first semester of Bible college, I was just chasing girls, mostly just awkwardly talking to them, trying to charm them, quoting really bad movie lines. And oh man, it was horrible. But there was such this pressure, I guess, to get married. You'd have the occasional like campus pastor or guest speaker get up and talk about how marriage is great and sex is awesome and marriage and the best sex is married sex. And it was almost like there was almost at times this emphasis that like you don't get married to get married. You get married to have sex. And it was so like sometimes it was just a lot of the time, not sometimes, a lot of the time it was just too far. Like when things would start to get a little more graphic, it just got really uncomfortable for a lot of us. And it was weird, but looking back, it speaks so much to this idea of marriage that we have as followers of Jesus. Like I remember growing up, and I remember the first time I kissed a girl on the cheek, and my mom found out, and she whooped my butt because my mom was convinced that if I kissed a girl on the cheek, I was probably going to have sex with her. And she was furious. Like she whooped my butt. She chewed me out. I was grounded. I had to stop. I was 11, almost 12 years old. I kissed a girl on the cheek. Like that was it. It wasn't. I mean, 11 is super young. Like the thought of my 11-year-old kissing a girl on the cheek, we're gonna have some issues. But my mom was furious, and my mom came from a background where she was hypersensitive to those things because of her own experiences and her own upbringing, and I don't blame her for that at all. Was whooping my tail the best answer? Probably not. But there was such this like weirdness around marriage and sex growing up. I remember it wasn't really till Bible college that like and maybe this just speaks to my own naivete. I don't know if that's the word, my own ignorance as a teenager, but like I always knew, the Bible talks about like, it speaks to the whole idea that sex is for married people, right? Sex should happen within the boundaries, the context of a marriage. But I didn't really like associate, like for me, marriage was just like, I get to spend the rest of my life with someone I love. Like that was so much of when I thought of marriage, like growing up and really up until I got to Bible college and sex became such an emphasized part of it. I never really like thought of, I just didn't like connect the two so much. Like sex became like this reward of marriage in Bible college. And what would happen is I think sometimes is people would get married. This foundation would exist for marriage, that we're getting married so we can have sex. And I just thought that was such a, like looking back especially, it's such a harmful reason to get married. Now to be fair, well, when I got engaged to my wife, I was very much looking forward to being intimate. But really, like I was so in love with my wife, and I knew we started kind of talking and interacting about 15 years ago, around this time, probably around this week, 15 years ago. And I knew when I was like finally comfortable really talking to her and chatting with her, I knew I was going to marry that woman. Like I knew 100% I was going to marry her. Like I just knew. And I knew because we clicked so well. We had our chemistry was so good. I just knew. Like I knew I was going to fall in love with this woman. I knew I was going to marry her. I knew I was going to spend the rest of my life with her. And so I wanted to marry my wife. I married my wife. Not wanted to. I married her. I guess I wanted, whatever. I married her because this woman was someone who, in the early times of the world's existence in Genesis, God creates man, he creates Adam, and he's like, you're gonna have dominion over the earth and everything. And then he says it's not good for Adam to be alone, and so God created Eve from Adam's rib. And I had a professor in college once say, let me make sure I don't butcher this. I had a professor in college explain it this way. It was this dude, Harvey Hartman. That was his name. He was one of my professors. This guy, I think I've talked about him. He's like Indiana Jones. But Dr. Hartman explained it this way. That God created, this was just like a very like poetic way of why God took Adam's rib and created. So close from the rib to be close to the heart, under the arm to be protected, or crap, what was it? From the side to be a partner, under the arm to be protected, close to the heart to be loved. I think that's what he said. Forgive me if I butchered that, Dr. Hartman, in case you happen to be listening to this. I don't think you even knew who I was 15 years later or whatever. Anyway, I just, I knew this was a woman that I loved. This is a woman I wanted to protect. This is a woman that I wanted to be my partner. And my wife compliments me in so many ways. So there's such this, in the church world, we place such this emphasis on marriage. This is it's like two big decisions to make in life: following Jesus and getting married. And I think what we have to be careful about is sometimes there's it's such a slippery slope that sometimes it's almost like marriage is like this on par with following the Lord. This is just my own observation. I could be completely misinterpreting, misconstruing, but there was, especially in Bible college and parts of Christian church culture, that marriage is this, it is the pinnacle of your life. And when you look at the classic dream of what it is, you grow up, you go to college, you get a great job that pays great money, you marry the person of your dreams, you have a family, you live the rest of your life together, you work till you retire, and then you retire and you're bored the rest of your life. And I almost want to say that we've idolized marriage and the institution of marriage and what it is to be in our lives. Is that fair to say? I don't know. But there is such this emphasis on marriage. And I always think of, anytime I have questions about anything or wrestle with anything, I always go to Scripture. What does the Bible say about this? What is it that the Apostle Paul says in 1 Corinthians, I think it's 1 Corinthians, he says, it's better to be single, because if you're single, you got more time to serve the Lord. And then he says, but some of you guys can't, this is my paraphrase, some of you guys can't control yourselves and your desires of the flesh, so it's better for you to get married, lest you fall into sin. So the Apostle Paul says, when you get married, you may not have as much time to tell people about Jesus. I got 4 kids, dude. I got 4 kids. Oh my gosh. We have weeks where they're so busy that I don't even feel like I have time to breathe. I get what Paul was getting at there. Do I regret my life decision at all? 100% absolutely not. I do not regret a single. I love my wife. I love my family. I love my kids. They drive me nuts, but I love them. I love the freaking fire out of them. I've been in this nostalgic mood lately where I'm just it's hit me how old my kids are getting. My 11-year-old is 11. My youngest, it hit me the other day. He's going to go to kindergarten in a little over a year. My kids are growing up, and I'm there's not enough time. Where's the time going? And, it's Paul says that. He's there's not enough time to tell people about Jesus and get married. But if you have to get married, right? But what happens is we put this big pressure on marriage, that it's the thing you do. It's the box you're supposed to check. And, it's like someone's living together, unwed couples live together, and it's you guys need to get married. Our counsel isn't always, the advice we give isn't always, it's like you guys either need to move out or you need to get married. And the heavier emphasis is on marriage. And I don't think it's always the healthiest thing. Or someone's been dating for a long time, right? You know what I mean? When someone's been dating for a long time, and it's are they ever going to get married? And they've been dating for so long, and you're are they going to get married? They're 100% sleeping together because they've been dating for 10 years and they're still not married. And we play this guessing assumption game, and that's not healthy either, because it's not our place to be deciding are they engaging in marital relations without being married? Are they going to get married? And there is something to be said about we got married right before I turned 21, right? We were young when we got married. I don't regret it. Would we? I don't know what our lives would look like if we didn't get married so young. For us, it was really I know we're gonna get married, and we know we're gonna get married. We actually had a date picked, an ideal date picked out before I even bought a ring. And it's like if you know you're gonna get married, why put it off for so long? There is an element of that. You want to, what's the old phrase? You want to You don't want to buy the cow, but you want to drink the milk, I think is what people say. And so it's like this, there is something to be said about that. And there is something to be said about, like, if you've been dating for a long time, like, how long is long enough? Because that's the other thing people say is, I'm not going to get married till I'm ready. The truth is, you're never ready to get married. You're never, I'm not going to have kids till I'm ready. You're never ready to have kids. You're never ready for those things. But doesn't it sound great to experience these things you're not ready for with someone that you love and you want to spend your life with? It's like, it's almost even, there's almost this, I really wrestle with this as a pastor. I wrestle with this so much. But like getting into ministry single, there's like this push to, like, in order to be effective in ministry, you have to be married. And I personally, as a youth pastor, I always, and this is my own, there's just too many things that are weird in the world with youth pastors and inappropriate relationships. And I always felt it was weird. And I'm not, like, if you're a single youth pastor and you're just doing and you're like, you got good accountability and all this thing, I just always thought it was weird when youth pastors were single. It just always made me feel a little uneasy. Or like when a lead pastor was single, it always made me feel a little uneasy. And I know, like, in certain denominations, there's like a life of celibacy and singleness, whatever. It just always felt weird to me to have a man pastor who was single, especially when it was like a younger youth pastor, single and ministering to young ladies. And this is a whole other conversation of like appropriate boundaries in ministry and in relationships. Like, this is not the podcast. It just felt weird. And this is something I've been trying to work and pray through. Like, there are situations where it's okay if there's good accountability, if there's good boundaries, and all these, like, good all of that, then that's like, it's not as weird as it feels. But there is almost like this, if you're going to be effective in ministry, the best way to be effective in ministry is to be married. And so sometimes what I would witness in Bible college, like, these dudes would be called to be pastors, and they'd be doing all their studies to be pastors, trying to chase a wife because they didn't feel like they get hired at a church as a single man. And that's not healthy either. Like, that's not healthy. I'm not saying that I'm right. I think because the reality is if you're a pervert, whether you're married or not, you're still a pervert. Like, that's a very blunt way of putting it. But like the reality is even in these instances where these pastors, actually, it seems like a lot of these pastors that engage in these affairs or infidelity, a lot of the time these are married dudes, youth pastors, lead pastors, whatever, they are married dudes. So like that's where I'm like really wrestling with this. Like, how can I feel this way if so many of these pastors that are falling to sin, how can I feel this way when so many of them are married? So whatever, like I said, it's something I'm working on. Or we see marriage as like this moral upgrade, right? Where it's like you get married and you're like that much closer to Jesus because you're married. Because the example in scripture of Christ and his church is Christ and his bride. And so when I'm married, I'm being more like Jesus, and my wife, we're being more like the Lord. We've morally upgraded because we're married. We're symbolic of Christ and his church. And I don't think that's healthy either. I just think that there's this pressure we put on marriage that is unhealthy. I think that we have to be careful not to allow marriage as a follower of Jesus to become an idol, where there's such an emphasis on getting married. I don't even think, this is my hot take, and maybe it's not a hot take. It feels like a hot take to me. I think one of the biggest mistakes people make is they get pregnant and they have a baby. Obviously, whatever, that's not a mistake. Holy crap. Can we strike that from the edit? Holy cow, that was a mess up. They have a baby and they get married because they have a baby, right? A marriage built on children, that's a terrible foundation. A marriage built on love, great foundation. A marriage built on Jesus, the best foundation. And when you get married because you're pregnant or because you got a girl pregnant, I think that's a really crappy foundation, right? I think it's just, and that was the way, like, my generation, like, we were the fruit of so many, because the fundamentalist Christian movement and all these things. So like so many millennials are the offspring of parents who got married because they got pregnant and maybe weren't necessarily in love. And I just think that's a horrible foundation to set. I think that if you're going to have sex, it should be in the context of marriage with someone you love. You shouldn't marry someone you don't love. And I don't want to sound like I'm condemning or convicting or coming down on anyone. It's just from my own observations and research shows it. You can easily Google what statistics around marriages that start with a pregnancy, and you'll find thousands of results that show you like this is not the move. I think that it's such a shaky foundation when you get married because you got pregnant. I think that the first step you should do is do whatever you can to take care of that baby. Go to counseling. Maybe in counseling you realize, we are ready to get married. Or, figure out a way to be a child needs a father and a child needs a mother. So you have to figure out how, if we don't get married, how do we raise this child so that the child has a mother and a father? Or you just don't have sex before you're married. That's also a great path to take. I was thinking through this too. I was talking to my wife about this. With people are going to get married, and a lot of the time you get engaged, you talk to your pastor, you're like, hey pastor, once you do my wedding, pastor goes, hey, you need to do some premarital counseling. Let's do that. And so in churches, we'll do like premarital counseling with a couple. And what I find is a lot of the time churches are not great at, we're great at preparing people for marriage, but we're not great at keeping people in marriage. Let me explain that. So premarital counseling, it's anywhere oftentimes from 4 to 8, 10, 12 weeks, whatever it is. Some churches do like a whole 3-month class series every week, a small group, whatever. And there's such this let's build this up, let's build this foundation, let's develop this thing, let's scope this out. We're going to talk about everything from why you want to get married, what marriage is, finances, sex, children, expectations, roles, all these plans. What does it look like? What's your 5-year plan, your 10-year plan? Where do you want to live? Where do you want to work? What's the spiritual foundation for your marriage? Are you aligned theologically? And there's all this energy put into a premarital counseling. And then after the couple gets married, it's just like, great, enjoy marriage. And my wife was actually talking to me. We were talking about this, and she was saying one of the things you could consider if you end up back in. My wife is convinced I'm going to lead a church one day, and I think I'm just going to trust God to do what He's got to do. She's saying should you do premarital counseling in the future? What if you did the first year of marriage, a 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a quarterly check-in? We're just going to meet for an hour and just, how are things going? How are you adjusting? I think it's genius. I think that having some, even if it's we have a newlyweds group at church. I think newlyweds groups are something that churches everywhere could be doing. Some churches are rocking with this, but it's just we get people so ready. This is it's discipleship. The churches, the bride of Christ has a discipleship problem where it's we lead people to Jesus. We get them to that point where they accept Christ as their Savior. We get them baptized. And then there's not always a strong discipleship follow-up process. And I think it's like that with marriage, right? We get people ready. We teach about healthy dating and getting engaged and preparing for marriage, premarital counseling, foundations, and we get them married, and then there's no discipleship after that. And I can tell you, from my personal experience, just to be open, man, there are so many times it would have been great if we had some kind of discipleship as newlyweds. And when I say discipleship, I'm not saying a church does a marriage series and that's sufficient. Discipleship, like this whole idea of, I would love to have, my wife and I, we've been married 13 years now, like I said. We as a couple who've been married for 13 years, take a young newlywed couple under our wings. If you're a young newlywed couple and you're looking for this, by the way, slide into my email, thebadpastorpodcast@gmail.com. And we disciple them. Or you get couples in your church that are been married for 30, 40, 50, 60 years, and they're discipling a young newlywed couple. I think that would be a phenomenal discipleship program for newlyweds. Because like I said, we get them there. And it's like Proverbs 24. It says something like, I wrote like my paraphrase, prepare your work outside, and after that, build your house. And so before you get married, you need to have a strong foundation. But like having a home, it has to be maintained. And so sometimes you have to bring outside help, contractors, to help maintain your home. And so it's like, I just love the idea of building things in such a way that like you have this discipleship process post marriage. That's a genius idea. Someone write this down, and I'm gonna develop that more. What if that's like the Bad Pastor podcast, sequel is a marriage discipleship podcast. I am gonna have my wife come on the podcast soon, by the way, sweetheart. I hope you're good with that. Just kidding. She keeps telling me she's ready when I'm ready. Anyway, marriage, maturity, dude. I when I got married, I thought I would just mature. I thought the challenges of being a young man would disappear. Those were some of the things I read told me that. Some of the other things I read said marriage doesn't fix everything. That's the reality, though, is we get married and we think our struggles, our immaturity is going to disappear because now we're married. It's going to morph us into this super great married husband or wife. And the reality is the challenges we had before getting married, guess what? There's still challenges after you get married. If you don't work out those things before marriage, you're going to work those things out. A year ago, it was a little over a year ago, my wife and I, it was a Friday morning, we had this conversation. We, for almost 12 years of our marriage, it seemed like we were having the same arguments and confrontation every few months. We were repeating the same fight. We were having the same disagreements. And it was a little over a year. It was a Friday morning, and I was home from work because I had Fridays off at the time. And we talked, and that conversation shifted and pivoted so stinking much for our marriage, because there were cycles that we were caught in. And that conversation, in that moment, we broke through some of those cycles, and we worked through some of the things that we had never worked through in almost 12 years of marriage. Can I tell you, young engaged person, young couple, young newlyweds, if there are things you have not worked out before standing in front of your family and your friends and your pastor and the Lord himself, sliding those rings on each other's fingers saying, I do. If you have not worked those things out, guess what? They're going to get worked out eventually. They will continue to bubble up. They will continue to reveal themselves. Again, discipleship. This is where it will be so helpful. Having a trusted couple that you can sit with and you can say, hey, we keep having this argument. How do we stop? Well, what's the argument about? Okay. How do you feel with that argument? I'm not against marriage counseling. I think there's so much value in having an outside voice that you trust. The challenge is you're like paying them. And so like the cheap side of me, the frugal, someone corrected me yesterday, said, you're not cheap, you're frugal. Like you have that wrestling, like I'm paying this person $150, $200 an hour. Like this is insane. But there's nothing, this is why I think discipleship, marriage discipleship in churches would be so splendid, would be so great, is there's not that pressure of I have to pay this person $150. But it's like having someone who's willing to say, hey, look, here's how we overcame some of these obstacles and roads. Here's the conversations we've had. Man, this was supposed to be a marriage talk, but it's really turning into a discipleship talk. Marriage is so tricky because it reveals the things about you that maybe you didn't realize were problems. It reveals and it almost like heightens your sins, because your sins are no longer just your spouse. You now have someone else who's close enough to you to recognize, hey, you ever notice that you do this a lot? Or it's like statistically, there's all kinds of statistics, but like men who are have porn addictions, they get married and think, well, because I can have sex now, I'm no longer addicted to porn. But the reality is like your wife's not always going to be in the mood. You're not always going to be in the mood. So like preheating the oven is a lot of work. Sometimes it's just easier to cook in the microwave. It's a really crass statement. I apologize. But you get married and you think, especially with sexual sin, like this isn't gonna be a challenge because I can have sex. And the truth is, like, it was a challenge before marriage, and it's gonna be a challenge after marriage. Okay, affairs happen, infidelity occurs, and it's not just men. Women struggle with that kind of sin, with sexual sin, just as much as men. Right? And affairs happen. Wives have affairs. Husbands have affairs. And it's not exclusive to either side. But we get married and we think that all that's going to go away because we're married now. And the truth is that stuff doesn't go away. You still struggle with the things you struggled with before marriage. Just now it impacts more than you. Now it impacts someone else. When you bring kids into the mix, your sin doesn't just impact your wife and you, it impacts your children. There's this verse in, I can't remember if it's in Exodus or it's somewhere in the early Old Testament. It talks about how a father's sin impacts generations to come. So like your sin as a father will impact your kids and their kids and their kids. And so we have to be mindful of that. If we don't shore up our own selves, our own hearts, our own lives, when we get married, it doesn't impact just us. It impacts the people around us. And so that's why Paul says, like, hey, look, it's just better to get married than to burn with passion, right? Like, if there are people, and the reality is like marriage is it is necessary for people to get married and procreate. Like, that was part of God's design. Not for everyone. For some people, they have the gift of singleness. I hate how churches have always said the gift of singleness, because I've never felt a single person. I've never met a single person who felt that singleness was a gift. Not until a certain point, because then they're like, look, this is great. I chill. I hang out. I leave my mess out. No one fusses at me. I'm just chilling. My mom cleans up. I'm just kidding. But like, I've never, I don't know. Churches have always like, it's like we call it the gift of singleness because we want to make people feel good about not being single. But it's like, they're sad, dude. Like, it's okay if they're lonely. It's not good for man to be alone. But I think that's where the value, again, of discipleship exists. That for a single person, it's great to have a group, someone discipling you, but someone also that you just spend time with who maybe is also single. Maybe you guys go camping together or hunting or to knitting classes or cake decorating or pottery, or I don't know what people do. I've got 4 kids, man. I barely ever leave the house. I work from home. But like Paul says that it's better for people to get married if they've just like have this strong desire to get married than to sit and be single and burn with passion. So we talked about like some of the challenges, maybe the truth about marriage culture, maybe where we've gone wrong, maybe what we need. But like, what does healthy look like in a marriage, right? Like what does it actually look like to be healthy in a marriage? So this whole idea of getting married is you're spending the rest of your life with someone. You're sharing your life with them, right? You're living life together. You're doing life together, And so like there is this intimacy that is experienced beyond physical intimacy, but there's an emotional, a mental, and a financial intimacy, a spiritual intimacy, right? Like, I'm horrible about this. Like, I do not pray with my wife enough. I'm horrible about this, right? This is my hot take. I always think it's weird when married couples have separate banking accounts. Right? You want to share everything but your finances, whatever. I guess just my take. That's my hot take. Some people are like Dave Ramsey very much says, like, why do you need to have separate bank accounts? Personally, I just think it's weird. Like, the whole idea of going to my wife and saying, hey, rent's due. Can you Venmo me your half of rent? Hey, the power bill was $200 this month. We ran the heat a little much. Can you Venmo me your half of the power bill? Like, that just feels awkward to me. It just feels weird. It feels like I'm going to my, like in college, going to my roommate and saying, hey, the bills came in. We're going to split it 3 ways. You owe 60, you owe 60, I owe 60. Like, it just feels weird. Maybe it works differently. Maybe it's different. My wife is a stay-at-home mom. So I maybe like what? So what? Like in that instance, what I like I get paid and I transfer half my paycheck to her account. Like, how does that work? That's my take. I think it's kind of weird. I don't understand. Someone comment, give me a good reason why it makes sense, why it works best. I don't know. I don't get it, dude. But like, there is this intimacy shared within marriage that's so important. And so like the first thing I do when someone tells me they're going to get married, why do you want to get married? You know, like why? What made you get to this point? You know, I want to understand like your story. How'd you get here? Um, you know, I love Malachi. It talks about guard your heart, stay loyal. Like it speaks on how God hates divorce. And I want to be careful here because there are people that are in marriages that they need to get out of. And the Bible makes a case for marriage, like in the case of like abuse or adultery, or if a spouse leaves you. Like if your spouse leaves you, like you can't force them to come back, and that's on them. So there is like God hates divorce. But I don't want anyone to hear this and interpret I've got to stay in this marriage where my spouse is abusing me. That's not what I'm saying at all. If you're in that situation, you need to get help. Like, send me an email and I will try to connect you with someone who can help you. Do not stay in a marriage where you're being abused just because some bearded guy on the internet said so. Like, that's not the case I'm making at all. What I'm saying is, if you're in a marriage and you're coasting along, and I've been through those seasons, you do have to put in the work. You know, it's like the wife will go, my husband never does anything. The husband will go, my wife never does anything. But there's such this like you're too busy worried about the contributions of the other person. What are you contributing? Like, what's your contribution to the marriage? And it's not, maybe you're doing all the work. Maybe you're pulling all the weight. Maybe your spouse is going through something. This is a season where you have to step up more. Maybe this is a season where maybe there is a bigger conversation that needs to be had. Maybe there's something going on with your partner that needs to be talked through. And it may be something that needs to be talked through with a discipler or a counselor or a pastor. But I just want to emphasize like, we have to be careful how we view marriage in the church and Christian culture, because speaking of marriage, my children are yelling. We're borderline creating this idol of marriage sometimes. Other times we create this idea that marriage is a waste because it limits our ability to impact people for the gospel. Or we encourage people to rush into marriage or to move too slow into marriage. And just like it's a big decision that you have to think through and consider. So be wise about it. Be prayerful about it. For the couple who feels pressure to get married, why do you want to get married? Why do you feel pressure to get married? For the single person, do you want to get married? Why or why not? For the church leaders, the church pastors, like, what can we do to better create these foundations in marriages for the people we lead so that these marriages are built well? How can we disciple people more? What kind of people do we have in our church that can help disciple marriages? It's not that we need to, like, I think the conversation of marriage needs to take place more often. And I think there's so much value, even as a married person with married friends, having conversations about marriage. Like, you know, it's interesting with our friends, we talk about everything else, but we just don't talk about our marriages. And it's not like, my husband did all this, my wife don't do nothing, my wife won't sleep with me, my husband won't take the trash out. Like, it's not like you're complaining, but it's just like, hey, how are things going in your relationship? How are the kids doing? How's work? How's your marriage? Like, how can we better encourage one another in our relationships and in our marriages? How can we better build one another up? How can we, like Galatians 6:2 says, bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ? I don't have all the answers. I just want to open the conversation. Like, how can we be married better? How can we support people better who aren't married or are struggling to get married or are walking through a divorce? Like, how can we as followers of Jesus better support one another in or around marriage? That's the conversation I want to start. If you have ideas, put them in the comments below. Marriage is this beautiful, beautiful covenant before the Lord, and so we have to take it seriously. We have to honor it, and we have to honor God through it. So how can we do that better? How can we ensure that we're still finding our identity and our value in Jesus Christ and not in our marriage and our relationships? That's the episode. We'll see you in the next one.